It was a rousing romantic comedy.
Oh, do you feel the breeze from the subway?
One that provided a revealing look at America's #1 sex goddess.
I can feel the goose pimples.
But the white-hot sexuality of Marilyn Monroe scorched the censors
Would you mind fastening my straps in the back?
and touched off a blaze of controversy that sent the actress's personal life into a devastating tailspin.
Sorry, I have to go on.
A behind-the-scenes glimpse at Hollywood's most sizzling sex farce.
Hi.
And a rare look at the censored footage they said was too hot for the big screen.
Don't stop. Don't ever stop.
On Backstory, The 7-Year Itch.
And now that I have your attention, I want to warn all you girls and women of New York about an evil, dangerous, perfectly dreadful married man who lives downstairs in my building.
The 7-Year Itch blew the lid off 1950s conservatism.
Hey, wait a minute!
It shocked audiences with its irreverent look at marital infidelity.
I mean, I wouldn't be lying on the floor in the middle of the night in some man's apartment drinking champagne if he wasn't married.
And showcased Marilyn Monroe in her most sexually suggestive role to date. The film was based on George Axelrod's popular 1952 Broadway play about a married man who has an affair with his attractive upstairs neighbor. Hollywood couldn't wait to cash in on the smash hit. But in the 1950s, movies did not enjoy the artistic freedom that live theater had always taken for granted. Any film produced in Hollywood was subject to the scrutiny of the all-powerful Hays Office.
Well, the Hays Office was the self-censorship body that the Hollywood studios created when they were very fearful that the government was going to step in and create a much more onerous form of censorship.
The vulgar, the cheap, and the tawdry is out. There is no room on the screen at any time for pictures which offend against common decency, and these the industry will not allow.
The censors proclaimed that any film based on the 7-Year Itch would be a blatant violation of the production code, which stated that adultery must never be the subject of comedy or laughter. Hollywood studios quickly backed off from the provocative play.
It is surreal that this went on. This kind of a minority opinion could affect the whole course of the movie business, and everybody was so terrified. The studios were terrified of these people.
But for Academy Award-winning writer-director Billy Wilder, The 7-Year Itch was not only a great film waiting to be made, it was also an irresistible challenge waiting to be met. Wilder had miraculously managed to sidestep the rigid rules of censorship many times in the past, making films with controversial themes like seduction, adultery, and alcoholism, and he wasted no time in approaching George Axelrod about purchasing the rights to his play.
Billy Wilder was my hero. I remember the phone rang in my apartment one night, and Billy Wilder from Hollywood, it's like having a call from God, you know?
Axelrod insisted that no film version be made until the play had completed its Broadway run. But with Wilder on board, The 7-Year Itch once again became a hot property in Hollywood. Among the contenders bidding on the project was 20th Century Fox, which had a leg up on its competition, in the form of a 28-year-old sex goddess named Marilyn Monroe.
In retrospect, although the 50s is clearly a time of very real political repression and social and sexual repression, you can see those early signs of changing values, and Monroe was clearly part of that.
She sang of love just as she lived for love, like a Lorelei, flaunting her charms as she lured men on and on to their eternal destruction.
Marilyn's film career skyrocketed with such hits as Niagara, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, and How to Marry a Millionaire. In 1953, a nude photo of the actress appeared on the first issue of Playboy magazine and sent shockwaves across the nation.
I don't think there's any question but what the success and the popularity of Marilyn Monroe is directly related to her more obvious sexuality and the very fact that she did pose nude and then admit it and make jokes about it, say that she had nothing on but the radio. And by the end of the year, she was the biggest star in Hollywood.
After Fox secured the film rights to The 7-Year Itch, attention then turned to the casting of Marilyn's enviable co-star. But because the part of Richard Sherman was that of the quintessential everyman, The filmmakers rejected Gary Cooper and other suave, classically handsome leading men. They were looking for someone plain, average, and not necessarily handsome. They were also looking for someone with a comedic touch. Enter Walter Matthau, a rubber-faced actor whom Axelrod had spotted playing a small role in a Broadway play.
The old nostalgia never misses. Never misses? What am I trying to do? I'll call her up and I'll tell her not to come, that's all. Why ask for trouble? I don't know her number. I don't even know her name.
After seeing Matthau's performance in the part, Billy Wilder believed he had found his man. But 20th Century Fox was unwilling to take the risk on a newcomer, and Wilder next turned his sights on the actor who had originated the role on Broadway, Tom Ewell.
Absolutely ridiculous. The first night Helen leaves and I'm bringing dames into the apartment.
Wilder knew that casting this ordinary-looking actor opposite Marilyn Monroe would turn the 7-Year Itch into the ultimate male fantasy. The studio agreed, and Tom Ewell won the role. But what the filmmakers didn't count on was the wrath of the Hayes office, which was eager to pounce on the production. Wilder and Axelrod had taken all explicit references to adultery out of their script, but they had hoped to merely hint at an extramarital affair in a short scene where a maid finds a hairpin in Ewell's bed. Studio head Darryl Zanuck and producer Charles Feldman adamantly refused the idea, fearing a code rejection. The exasperated Wilder complained that the movie was made under straight-jacketed conditions.
The picture, you know, it's very simply, I mean, it's about a guy who has an affair with a girl when his wife is away for the summer. And then he feels terribly guilty for it, and the guilts are very funny. But if he hasn't had the affair with the girl, he's got nothing to feel guilty about, so the picture doesn't really make very much sense.
The Hayes office demanded that much of Axelrod's most entertaining dialogue be removed from the script as well.
George Axelrod is a great writer of sexual comedy lines. It is very troubling, I think, to most filmmakers who want to adapt a humorous play from Broadway to Hollywood to find that the funniest lines and the funniest moments are being just ripped away by a censorship board.
We were hamstrung because of the censorship. You'd swap them 2 darns for a damn. You're never allowed to say son of a bitch. I fought for son of a bitch. Couldn't have it.
Oh, the hell with that. Be goddamned if I'll tell her.
We did as much as we could, but boy, I tell you, they were really stringent.
Increasingly frustrated, the disheartened filmmakers feared that their once lively sex comedy was losing its sizzle. But what the censors underestimated was the cinematic genius of Billy Wilder and the pulse-pounding potency of Marilyn Monroe on the big screen.
Getting married? That'd be worse than living at the club. Then I'd have to start getting in by 1 o'clock again.
Very true, you probably would. At least occasionally.
When the 7-Year Itch began filming in September of 1954, Marilyn Monroe was no longer just Hollywood's greatest sex symbol. She was the world's most famous newlywed.
Romance that thrills the world. The marriage of Marilyn Monroe and Joe DiMaggio attracts a record crowd to the San Francisco court where the ceremony is performed.
Her marriage to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio earlier that year had set off a media firestorm.
Nice work, Marilyn. And the same to you, Joe.
Fox publicists fanned the flames by alerting the press of the star's every move, and the Hollywood gossip machine turned its spotlight on the filming of the 7-Year Itch.
People like Marilyn Monroe are always threats to the moralists in the establishment who are trying to protect their fellow man against an excess of passion.
How would you like to come down here and have a drink with me? Maybe.
Why, thanks. I'd love it.
You would?
Sure, it'd be fun. Let me just go put something on. I'll go into the kitchen and get dressed.
The kitchen?
Yes, when it's hot like this, you know what I do? I keep my undies in the icebox.
In the icebox?
See in a minute.
The Hayes office was also keeping a watchful eye over the production. And if that weren't enough, the filmmakers also had another mighty group of moralists breathing down their necks, the Catholic Legion of Decency.
The power they had rested in the fact that at Sunday Mass, they could tell millions of Catholics that on pain of undermining their soul, they must not go to the movies that the Legion was condemning.
Priests representing the Legion of Decency hovered around the set with copies of the provocative script in hand.
There was a Monsignor Biddle, who was the Catholic Legion of Decency guy, who was spearheading a lot of this. And finally, they would say to me, why don't you, Billy, just sit down with Monsignor Biddle and write it with him, and the whole thing will be, Yeah, then we won't have any trouble with the censorship. I said, I don't think I want a screen credit with Monsignor Biddle.
Equally frustrating for Billy Wilder was his leading lady's highly erratic behavior. Marilyn's breathtaking rise to superstardom had done little to curb her lifelong pattern of self-destruction. Suffering from bouts of depression, the actress often appeared distracted on the set and had trouble remembering her lines. But Billy Wilder soon recognized that Marilyn's luminous screen presence eclipsed all the endless takes and the frustrating delays.
No matter how you suffered through those days and weeks and pulling those lines out like a dentist, they looked so absolutely and totally natural once you said them, and you loved on the screen, and that's the one that's thing that survived.
And I get to speak lines, too. I had onions at lunch. I had garlic dressing at dinner. But he'll never know, because I stay kissing sweet, the new dazzle-dent way.
You do that beautifully.
She was a wonderful, wonderful, strange, sad, tragic, mixed up, authentic genius. Magical on the screen.
It shakes me. It quakes me. It makes me feel goose pimply all over.
There's no doubt that when you're able to feature a star who's charismatic and as appealing sensually as Marilyn Monroe, you know, you're bringing a lot to the film. True, he lost the adulterous relationship. True, he lost a great many of Axelrod's wittiest lines. But in place of that, he did have Marilyn Monroe.
Because now I'm going to take you in my arms and kiss you. Very quickly and very hard.
Hey, wait a minute! What happened? I kind of lost track.
I don't know. Well, this is terrible. There's nothing I can say except that I'm terribly sorry. Nothing like this ever happened to me before in all of my life.
Honest? Happens to me all the time.
Although her character was known only as the girl, Marilyn clearly became the star of the film.
It was a mixed blessing. Marilyn was wonderful. It wouldn't have been the hit it was without her. On the other hand, she unbalanced the whole picture because it's essentially the guy's story. You see, it's really about the man, but it became about Marilyn Monroe.
Wait a minute, Dickie boy. Let's just take it easy. What blonde in the kitchen? Wouldn't you like to know? Maybe it's Marilyn Monroe.
While filming on location in New York, Marilyn created pandemonium everywhere she went.
Well, we're here to make the 7-year itch.
Location shots on the 7-year itch?
Uh-huh.
That's your latest picture, right?
Yes. Yes, I'm looking forward to it very much.
Joe didn't come along with you, huh?
No.
Did he see you off in Hollywood last night?
Oh, yes.
Well, you brought your hairdresser and your drama coach and 4 men from 20th Century Fox. All this and no Joe, huh?
It's kind of shame.
Sensing a good story, Hollywood columnist Walter Winchell phoned his friend Joe DiMaggio back in Los Angeles and suggested he fly to New York to witness the excitement his wife was generating. But by the time DiMaggio joined his wife in New York, their 8-month-old marriage was already showing signs of strain.
Joe had understandable, somewhat old-world ideas about, a woman staying at home and having babies and dressing rather demurely, and that wasn't what Marilyn wanted. Marilyn wanted a career.
At 1 o'clock in the morning of September 15th, Joe looked on as hordes of fans and photographers, lured by Fox publicity, began lining the streets. They were about to witness film history as Marilyn shot what would become her most famous scene.
She understood her skirt would be blowing up, and she noticed in the mirror that you could see through the panties. So she requested and put on a second pair of panties, 2 pair of panties. And in the dressing room, it covered the problem. But outside on the street with 5,000 onlookers, under the Klieg lights, it didn't cover the problem.
The leering onlookers whistled and cheered through take after take as Marilyn repeatedly missed her lines. An increasingly embarrassed and angry DiMaggio stood nearby with his hands thrust in his pockets, appearing visibly upset.
I would have been upset too if I was standing on the sidelines and there are 10 or 20,000 people there watching the skirt of your wife blowing overhead, Naturally, to begin with, take after take after take, and then the New Yorkers, various little comments being shouted from the sidelines, and many of those. So he didn't like it very much.
The more Marilyn delighted in the commotion, the more DiMaggio felt publicly humiliated.
That scene, that evening, was a pivotal moment in the marriage of Joe and Marilyn because it became clear that her role and her stardom and her independence clashed with his needs and his expectations of what she was and what she would be willing to be.
DiMaggio left the shoot in disgust, refusing any comment to the press. The couple quarreled bitterly that night in their hotel. Joe flew back to Los Angeles alone. Fox's publicity stunt had paid off for the studio, but it ended in disaster for Marilyn and Joe. Within weeks, their marriage was over. As word leaked out, the press descended on their home, and America watched in disbelief as the storybook romance of two superstars unraveled in less than 9 months.
Sorry, I have to go. I'm sorry.
When Monroe returned to the set, she appeared sedated and confused. Billy Wilder took the flak when the studio complained about the overtime caused by Marilyn's behavior. Ironically, the footage shot on that infamous night in New York never made it to the screen. The noise of the crowds had made it unusable, and Wilder was forced to reshoot the scene in the privacy of the Fox lot. An exact replica of the theater was erected, and Marilyn submitted to another 40 takes. But by the time the Hayes office finished with it, movie audiences saw far less of Marilyn than the gawkers on Lexington Avenue had.
Didn't you just love the picture? I did. But I just felt so sorry for the creature at the end.
Sorry for the creature? Why'd you want him to marry the girl?
He was kind of scary looking, but he wasn't really all bad. I think he just craved a little affection, you know, a sense of being loved and needed and wanted.
That's a very interesting point of view.
Oh, do you feel the breeze from the subway? Isn't it delicious?
Sort of cools the ankles, doesn't it?
The skirts went up over her head, which they used in the ads, but we couldn't use in the picture. If you look at the movie, this skirt never goes up above her knees here, really.
But the final result still wasn't free from controversy. The scene as shot continued, but the dialogue was considered too daring and was cut by the Hayes office before the film was released. But recently discovered in the Fox vaults was a rare print containing this deleted footage.
Oh, here comes another one. This one's even cooler. Must be an express. Don't you wish you had a skirt? I feel so sorry for you in those hot pants.
Another sequence that didn't escape the censors was this bathtub scene, where Marilyn gets her toe stuck in a faucet.
Then he made me play chopsticks. Then suddenly he turned on me, his eyes bulging. He was frothing at the mouth, just like the creature from the Black Lagoon.
I knew it. I knew it. That's how these stories get started.
Billy Wilder's original version contained this provocative payoff that also lay hidden in the studio vaults for over 40 years.
And suddenly he turned on me, his eyes bulging. He was frothing at the mouth, just like the creature from the Black Lagoon.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
The 7-Year Itch completed production on November 4th, 1954. Zanuck was so eager to release the picture that he paid George Axelrod a $175,000 bonus for permission to open the film while the Broadway play was still running. Any initial doubts about the film had long since disappeared. It was clear that the 7-Year Itch would be a smash hit, and Marilyn Monroe's star would shine brighter than ever. Rarely in the history of motion pictures had any film received as much publicity as the 7-Year Itch. A 52-foot-high cutout of Marilyn was even erected in front of Loew's State Theater in New York's Times Square. But for Marilyn Monroe, it was a symbol of success and of frustration. Marilyn now desperately wanted to escape the blonde bombshell persona she had worked so hard to create.
We were sitting one time at a coffee place, and they were putting up a huge picture of her from the 7-Year Itch. You know, where she stands over the subway grating? And she looked up and she said, "You see, that's all they think of me. That's what they think of me."
Said, what has Marilyn Monroe got that a million other women have and prefer not to show?
Very nice. Some girl.
I think it's very nice, but I'd rather it were me.
I think it's wonderful. I think it's wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Well, it's pretty vulgar, if you ask me.
The 7-Year Itch opened on June 1st, 1955, Marilyn Monroe's 29th birthday. True to form, Marilyn arrived late to the premiere and created a near riot as she entered the theater on the arm of her ex-husband. The 7-Year Itch turned out to be an even bigger sensation than anyone had anticipated. Audiences and critics alike were bowled over by Marilyn's performance. The sizzling sex farce became Fox's biggest money-making hit of 1955. Marilyn was now one of the most powerful stars in Hollywood. She demanded approval over her scripts and directors, and she got it. Billy Wilder reteamed with Marilyn Monroe 4 years later in the irreverent sex comedy Some Like It Hot. Wilder and other progressive filmmakers like him continued to make film after film that pushed the boundaries of censorship. By 1968, the Hays Office had lost its stranglehold on Hollywood, and the code was completely revised. No longer enforcing censorship, the Motion Picture Association of America instituted the rating system that continues today. Over the next 7 years, Marilyn Monroe would make only a handful of films, each one showcasing her versatility and talent. But in 1962, Marilyn Monroe's career was cut short when the star was found dead of an apparent overdose of sleeping pills. She was only 36 years old. It was the death of a star and the birth of a Hollywood icon. While it appears delightfully innocent by contemporary standards, the 7-Year Itch tested the limits of censorship in an age governed by rigid moral codes.
Wish we had been able to do it the way we were able to do it on the stage. I mean, that was nobody's fault. That was just the times, you know. But for the conditions under which we had to make it, I think it's very good. And I'm delighted that it's there.
That's what's really exciting.
The 7-Year Itch remains an entertaining tribute to one of Hollywood's brightest stars and to the tenacious filmmakers who paved the way for artistic freedom.
Well, good night.